In 1917, an empire that had stood for centuries fell apart, plunging a vast nation into chaos. The Russian Civil War was one of the most complex and brutal conflicts of the 20th century, a multi-sided struggle that would determine the fate of millions and reshape the world. Let's explore how this monumental war unfolded. It all began with the collapse of the Romanov dynasty. After 3 years of draining warfare in the Great War, the Russian Empire was on its knees. Food shortages, military defeats, and social unrest led to massive protests. In February 1917, Tsar Nicholas II abdicated, ending centuries of imperial rule and leaving a massive power vacuum. The country was exhausted, and a provisional government struggled to maintain control amid the growing instability. In this climate of uncertainty, a radical political force saw its chance. In October 1917, Vladimir Lenin and the Bolshevik Party seized power in Petrograd. Their message was simple and powerful: peace, land, and bread. They promised an end to the war, redistribution of land to the peasants, and food for the starving cities. But their vision for a socialist state was not universally accepted. Almost immediately, opposition began to mount from all corners of the former empire. What followed was not a simple two-sided war. It was a chaotic freefall. The map of Russia fractured as multiple factions rose to challenge the new Bolshevik government. Former Tsarist officers formed armies to restore the old order. Liberal and moderate socialist groups who had been sidelined by the Bolsheviks took up arms. Anarchist militias, like Nestor Makhno's Black Army in Ukraine, fought for a stateless society. Nationalist movements in places like Ukraine, Finland, and the Baltics saw an opportunity to declare independence. And to make things even more complicated, foreign powers soon joined the fray. At the heart of this sprawling conflict were two main adversaries, the Reds and the Whites. The Reds were the Bolsheviks and their supporters who organized the formidable Red Army under the leadership of Leon Trotsky. Their goal was to defend and expand the revolution. Opposing them was the White Movement, a loose coalition of anti-Bolshevik forces. Led by former imperial generals like Anton Denikin and Alexander Kolchak, the Whites were united by their opposition to the Reds, but were deeply divided on everything else, from politics to military strategy. This lack of a unified vision would ultimately prove to be their fatal weakness. The conflict quickly drew international attention. Fearing that the revolutionary flame would spread beyond Russia's borders, several countries, including Britain, France, Japan, and the United States, intervened. They sent troops and supplies to support the White armies, hoping to strangle the new socialist state in its cradle. Foreign forces occupied key ports like Murmansk, Arkhangelsk, and Vladivostok, blockading the country and adding another layer of complexity to the war. To survive this onslaught, the Bolsheviks implemented a ruthless set of policies known as war communism. They nationalized all industry, seized grain from peasants to feed the army and the cities, and established a highly centralized, state-controlled economy. While these brutal measures helped keep the Red Army supplied, they had devastating consequences for the civilian population. Famine swept through the countryside, cities emptied out as people fled in search of food, and industrial production plummeted. The country was plunged into a severe economic crisis on top of the raging war. Despite the immense internal and external pressures, the tide began to turn in 1919. The Red Army, once a disorganized militia, had been molded into a disciplined and effective fighting force. They had the advantage of controlling the industrial heartland of Russia, including Moscow and Petrograd, which gave them access to railways and war factories. In contrast, the White armies were geographically scattered, poorly coordinated, and plagued by internal divisions. Their failure to win over the peasantry and their association with the old regime and foreign invaders eroded their support. One by one, the Red Army defeated the White generals. By 1921, the major fighting was over. The Red Army had secured victory across most of the former Russian Empire, though smaller conflicts continued for a couple more years. In 1922, the Bolsheviks formally established a new state on the ashes of the old, the Union of Soviet Socialist Republics, or the Soviet Union. The war was over, but the cost was staggering. Millions had died from combat, famine, and disease. The country was in ruins. The consequences were immense and long-lasting. The Russian Civil War not only created the world's first socialist state, but also redrew the map of Eastern Europe. Nations like Finland, Poland, and the Baltic states secured their independence. But for the next 70 years, the world would be defined by the ideological struggle that began in the ruins of the Russian Empire. The conflict left deep scars on the Russian psyche and set the stage for the political dynamics of the 20th century. Thanks for watching this journey into one of history's most pivotal conflicts. If you enjoyed the video and want to see more deep dives into epic history, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to the channel. See you next time.